Welcome into OutKick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. The last day of April. I hope all of you are having a fabulous Wednesday, wherever you may be across the country. We got a lot of stories to dive into. Let's hit the ground running right off the top here. Story out of, I believe it's the Austin American-Statesman, that the University of Texas is on track to spend $35 to $40 million on their football roster, which is a whoa, I think, for a lot of people, holy crap moment. That is an average. If it's $40 million, let me do the math on this, and obviously it's an average. Everybody is being paid differently, but presuming an 85 scholarship roster, that's an average of over $400,000 per player on an 85 scholarship roster. This is, and I think almost everybody out there would agree with me, absolutely and completely unsustainable. And I've made the analogy, this is what happened when the Berlin Wall came down in Europe back in the day. East Berlin, West Berlin are united, and you go from many of these communist countries, no capitalism at all, to unregulated capitalism overnight. And you can sell a kidney, and you can sell a nuclear weapon. And eventually that Wild West aspect of capitalism gets dialed back, and I think that's going to have to happen in college sports. There are reports of colleges paying 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 million dollars I've even seen on a 13-player basketball roster. I mean, this is bonkers town. And so eventually this is going to lead to a CBA, employment agreements, and this is not going to be able to continue. In the meantime, guys are making money hand over fist. I'm a capitalist. But I have to tell you, the challenge here is going to be if they try to rein back in these salaries, which the talk is that when this settlement agreement gets signed off on by the judge, and Adam, you can let me know the exact dollar figure. I think it's $20.4 million that schools are going to be able to pay themselves to athletes. How do you unring the bell when Texas is paying $35 to $40 million on their football roster right now? How do you go back to them and say, actually, everybody's going to have to take a big pay cut now? Your average player was making $400,000 a year, and now your average player is going to be making, I don't know, $100,000 a year. How do you go back on salaries? One of the biggest rules out there is most people don't ever want to take a pay cut. You probably don't want to get paid the same amount that you're already getting paid, no matter what you do. But once you ask somebody to take a pay cut, look out. You got major problems coming. College football, I think, is headed for major problems. College basketball, too. Because guys are getting paid now more than they could make to play in the pros. Think about this for a minute. There are lots of guys. If you are drafted outside of the first 3 rounds in college football, you make way less money playing in the NFL as a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round draft pick than many guys do to play in college football right now. That's going to sound crazy. Some of you are going to be like, it's going to be a holy crap moment. The average guy who is a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round draft pick that is coming out of a power conference school, SEC or Big Ten for sure, many of those guys are going to make less money in the NFL than they were making in college. And I might be the only person who is beating this drum. I haven't seen hardly anybody talk about it or write about it. If you doubt me on that, think about where college athletics has gone. We now have guys suing to be able to stay playing college sports. It used to be, if you remember Maurice Clarett, if you remember Michael Williams, I think was the guy's name, it used to be that people filed lawsuits to get out of college sports faster. Guys in college didn't want to have to go to college for a year for basketball. They didn't want to have to stay for 3 years for football. They were filing lawsuits to get out. Mike Williams, I think was that guy's name, if I misspoke, with USC wide receiver back in the day, if I remember. Maurice Clarett sued with him. It's probably 20 years ago-ish. Maurice Clarett sued after his freshman year, didn't want to have to wait. Same thing with Mike Williams before they were eligible to be drafted. Now guys like Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt are suing to be able to stay in college football and college sports longer. Why are they doing that? Because they stand to make more money playing college than they do in the NFL. You had, I think, the lowest number of early entrants that we've ever seen for the NBA draft because you can make more money playing college basketball than you can in the NBA as long as you're not one of those first 30 picks. You don't even get a guaranteed contract. You make more money in college by far, typically, than you're going to make playing overseas in the European leagues. This is all kind of wild, right? It's a new era. People are not used to it. And I think in general, it's going to have to be reconciled. It's going to have to be fixed. And the only way that I see to fix it, and I've been saying this for, go back in a decade, probably, been writing it, been saying it, you're going to have players as employees in some way. You're going to have a collective bargaining agreement, and you're going to have to spin off basketball, men's, and football into for-profit entities. It's the only solution. And otherwise, this spending is just untenable. And you know what nobody talks about anymore? Nobody even mentions anything having to do with education. But remember, ostensibly, the reason college athletics existed was to provide scholarships to athletes so that they could pursue their education while also playing sports. Am I the only person who thinks it's impossible for guys to get educations when they're going to 3 or 4 different colleges? We're not even pretending anymore. When was the last player you heard not be eligible for academics? I can't remember. It used to not be an uncommon occurrence. Can any of y'all remember the last player who didn't get the grades he needed to be eligible? Remember, this used to be not uncommon. Guy didn't have enough credit hours. You know, none of these players even go to class anymore, by and large. They all take online classes, and most of them are not even taking the online classes. They got somebody else doing all the work for them. They're not even required to show up in class anymore. And again, I understand, Clay, you're a dad now. I got a kid who's going to be in college next fall. I feel badly for a lot of these college kids because it's hard to build relationships with people that will be friends with you for the rest of your life when you go to 4 colleges in 4 years or when you go to 3 colleges in 4 years. My best friends probably as a group right now are the people that I went to law school with. Now, it's been 20 years now, but the people that I probably text with the most outside of work are people that I went to law school with. And I still text with a lot of the guys that I'm buddies with from college, too. You don't develop those relationships and those friendships 3 months at a time, bailing and going to a variety of different schools. Most guys do not have prolonged careers outside of college for athletics. Most people, the benefit of going to college and playing a sport is the connections you make that allow you to get that first job and have some success when you're in your 20s. I feel like a lot of people are losing this. And I'm not sure that the average player is going to end up benefiting from an NIL era. That's my concern. The guy who's going to get super rich, Arch Manning, if you're going to go make a lot of money in the NFL, then the money you make in college is a pittance of whatever you're going to make in the NFL. But if you're just jumping around and you're making $300,000 one year and $300,000 the next year, and hey, you might make $1 million in college, and that's amazing, and hopefully you invest it well, and that gives you a good foundation going forward. Most of these guys are going to have no money left. They're going to have no education, and they're going to have no actual skills that they're able to translate into a real job, and a lot of them aren't even going to have relationships with anyone that allows them to get that start because they don't have marketable skills and they don't have great relationships. And again, I talked about this with the Nico story. To me, the job of a dad or mom is to have a 20-year horizon, not a one-year horizon. And I understand when you're 18, a year feels like it takes forever. You guys remember? When you're 18 to 22 feels like a lifetime to you if you go off to college. That's the reality of how this feels. It feels like forever. 15 years old or 14 years old when you start high school to 18 feels like a lifetime. I get it. The older you get, the faster that time passes, and the more you realize and see the longer horizon. And I feel like a lot of these guys are not making intelligent choices for themselves. They're making short-term decisions, and they're not getting the best results for them. And I preach it to my own kids. I'll preach it to you. I'll preach it to your kids if you need to pull them up and play this for them. Use the ball. Don't let the ball use you. A lot of kids are getting spit up and chewed out by basketball, football, baseball, hockey, whatever it is. And a lot of parents are buying into it too. And you're not developing marketable skills based on your sports talent. You are instead being used by that industry. And then as soon as you don't have value, you get kicked to the curb. And what do you have left? I think it's a really difficult choice and decision that lots of people need to be aware of. Okay, that's my update on the world of college athletics for the day. I believe we have a clip that we can put up. I will read it to you. The fallout continues to be a mess for everyone involved in the Bill Belichick interview. North Carolina has now issued a statement on Bill Belichick's CBS interview, and it reads as follows. I agreed to speak with CBS Sunday Morning to promote my new book. Prior to the interview, I clearly communicated with my publicist any promotional interview I did would focus solely on the contents of the book. Unfortunately, wasn't honored. Unrelated topics were introduced. And then this Jordan, what's her name again? Jordan Hudson, the 24-year-old girlfriend, interjects. And when he's asked, some of the clips make it appear as though we were avoiding the question of how we met. We've been open about the fact that Jordan and I met on a flight to Palm Beach in 2021. The final 8-minute segment does not reflect the productive 35-minute conversation we had, which covered a wide range of topics. Instead, it presents selectively edited clips, stills from just a few minutes of the interview to suggest a false narrative that Jordan was attempting to control the conversation, which is simply not true. Okay. Look, my advice, leave aside Belichick and everybody else. If you want the entire interview that you do to be public, you need to do a show like this with me, or you need to go do a podcast. The entire conversation is carried there. I don't know why people don't understand that in an interview that, for instance, CBS does or 60 Minutes does or whoever it is, they edit all of those conversations. They do not air the full conversation. This is the fight that Trump's having with 60 Minutes over Kamala Harris. They won't even put out, typically, a full transcript. We do not do edited conversations. I do not do, hey, I'll come on but I won't talk about X or Y interviews. I don't believe I have ever done an interview with preconditions in the history of my entire interview career, and I've interviewed a lot of people. Nobody has ever said, hey, we'll do it, but you can't ask about X or you can't ask about Y. I wouldn't do an interview in that context. I have turned them down. Back when I used to do OutKick the coverage, my producer, Danny G, he'll remember sometimes athletes or coaches would say, hey, we'll come on, but just so you know, we don't want to talk about it. I was like, well, why would I have you on and not ask you about the topics that everybody who is listening to us would want me to ask you about? I won't do the interview. So my suspicion is that whoever was involved in marketing did not actually talk to the guy doing the interview, and that he never agreed, hey, I'm not going to ask you questions about any of this. Also, when your girlfriend shows up and sits on the side of the interview and is in any way involved in the interview, I think you open yourself up to answering questions about what's going on during the course of the interview. If my wife showed up for one of my interviews and decided during the middle of the interview to come interject herself into the conversation and say, we're not going to answer that question, she would become a part of the story. If there are people off to the side that interrupt an interview that I'm conducting and the camera's rolling, I'm going to show that. So this is on, to me, Belichick and his team. Also, why does Belichick need attention? He wrote a book. He is requesting publicity for the book. Why? Did nobody sit down with Belichick and say, hey, dude, if you write a book, given the fact that you have a 24-year-old girlfriend, a huge part of the topic surrounding your book is going to be your current lifestyle, which is what people are talking about. And so nobody is just going to focus on the four corners of the book. And anyone telling you that that is likely to occur doesn't understand what they are saying. I'm going to have a new book out in November. That new book is going to have, hundreds of pages of my writing. But also every promotional interview that I do for that book is not going to focus entirely on the four corners of the book. I'm going to get asked a ton of questions that have nothing to do with what I put in the book. It would be crazy for me to say, hey, I'm writing a book and I'm expecting that if I had a personal life like Bill Belichick does, that nobody would be asking about it at all. Does that make sense? So I think this has turned into a huge embarrassment for North Carolina. As I said yesterday on the show, Belichick was the ultimate football-focused coach. All he cared about for his entire career as the Patriots coach was the game itself and answering questions about the game. I get it. But when you start having the social media profile that he does, when you dress up and pretend that you are fishing and pulled in a mermaid and it's your 24-year-old girlfriend, when you're laying on the beach and you are using your feet to hold her up in some sort of pose, to then argue, oh, I'm not going to answer any questions about my relationship with her, when she's sitting next to the interview, I'm sorry, I don't know how you have any complaint at all. Do you not understand how the media works? If you want to do, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Bill Belichick, I will sit and talk with you for as long as you want to talk. I'll read your book. I'll cover everything under the sun with you, but I'm not going to do an interview with you if you're saying, hey, I'm happy to come on, but I'll only talk about these subjects. And I doubt that anybody at CBS News is agreeing to that either, because frankly, everybody knows Belichick's coaching history. Why is that an interesting 8-minute conversation? Just FYI, my perspective. Okay, Giannis. Giannis and the Bucks lost last night, gave up, a 7-point lead in the final 40 seconds, basically, of this game to lose by 1 point. Damian Lillard seriously injured along the way. Going to be out for a substantial period of time. Tore his Achilles tendon, I believe. Now Giannis, 31 years old, won championship. Bucks have had a disappointing postseason since that championship. They give up this 7-point lead, lose by 1 on the road against the Pacers. Tyrese Halliburton's father runs out onto the court and taunts Giannis directly to his face. I thought this was a really bad look for Halliburton's dad, and I say that as a dad of 3. If you run out onto the court and taunt somebody, it's a bad look for you. It doesn't reflect well on you as a parent. Giannis, right after the game, sat down. They got into a confrontation, Giannis and Halliburton's dad did, in the immediate aftermath of the game. Giannis gave an incredible answer about that interaction. I shared it on social media. It's gone viral. I just think, man, if the NBA had been smart, they would have made this guy the front-facing aspect of the league instead of LeBron. Before we even play it, I want you to think about this. Most of you, I would venture to say, can't be as eloquent as Giannis is communicating in your native languages. I bet almost none of you, and certainly I'm not one of them, could be even close to as eloquent in Giannis as Giannis was in this clip in your second, third, or fourth language. Listen to this. Bravo, Giannis, talking about how to behave after a loss, his parenting philosophy, his own dad's parenting philosophy. I just thought this was extraordinary. Giannis has a lot of interesting things to say. He's capable of nuance. He's capable of introspection. He is capable of intelligent thought, which, frankly, most Americans are not, even in our native language, much less in a foreign tongue. Listen to this.
I believe like being humble in victory. That's how I am. Now there can be a lot of people out there that are like, no, when you win the game, you gotta talk, and you know it's a green light for you to be disrespectful towards somebody else. I disagree. Losing the game, emotions run high. Having a fan, which at the moment I thought he was a fan, but then I realized he was Tyrese's son, which I love. Tyrese, I think, is a great competitor. He was his dad, sorry. Coming in the floor and showing me his son a towel with his face. This is what we do. This is what we effing do. This the F we do. This. I feel like that's very, very disrespectful. Maybe if my son played basketball, I might be in the court. I might be the one on the court, and like 20 years later, you can play this interview and say, Giannis, you're contradicting yourself. But we'll see in 20 years. But I'm talking about right now how I feel. You know, having somebody's dad, which I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for his son, and I'm happy that he's happy for his son. That's how you're supposed to feel. But coming to me and disrespecting me and cursing at me, I think is totally unacceptable.
So well said. Bravo, 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 Giannis. I just wanted to play it on this show because I think we can help to put that clip out there when somebody says something that I think is profound or intriguing or particularly nuanced in its take. I think we deserve to give as much credit as we possibly can for it. I thought everything Giannis said there is something you should play for your own sons or daughters about how to behave, not only when you win, but also when you lose, and about expectations for parents. I mean, to run on the court and behave in that fashion, frankly, I found really disappointing, and I think it's become very, very common. And I'm not claiming that I'm perfect as a parent at sporting events, trying to get better. I don't have a filter. Sometimes I can't shut up. It's not going to surprise any of you. But I've never run on the court, never taunted some sort of opposing player. I give Giannis a lot of credit for the way that he handled that, talking about not only his own experience with his own dad, but also his own experience as a father. We all learn from the dads that hopefully we are fortunate enough to have, particularly in the world of sports, moms too. I had an incredible mom and dad, and I feel like I benefited as a result. And I think a lot of you can benefit from hearing what Giannis had to say there. Speaking of not benefiting, I think Kamala Harris lost. not only because she was an awful candidate, but because she picked an awful vice presidential candidate. And Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, as the pick, the idea was Democrats know that they have a huge issue with male voters. This is what I'm writing about in the new book that's going to be out in 2024. This is what I talked about at the University of Chicago. There are very few, if any, masculine Democrats now. That is, Democrat elected office holders that men would like to sit and have a beer with. And if you look at the data, Trump is massively popular with men, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. Women, not huge fans of Trump, but we have a profound gender dichotomy there. And the Democrats know it. And Kamala knew that she had an issue with men. Unfortunately for her, she thought Mike Walz would solve it. And Walz, speaking at Harvard, said, I was supposed to be the code speaker. I was supposed to connect with white male football fans and people who like to work on cars and trucks. And this is what Mike Walz said. And boy, oh boy, did this blow up in Democrat Party face. Listen.
I knew I was on the ticket. I would argue because we did a lot of amazing progressive things in Minnesota that improved people's lives. But I also was on the ticket, quite honestly, because I could code talk to white guys watching football, fixing their truck, doing that I could put them at ease. I was the permission structure to say, look, you can do this and vote for this. And you look across those swing states, with the exception of Minnesota, we didn't get enough.
Tim Walz is a lesbian woman's idea of what men would like. And unfortunately, that is the whole characteristic, I would say, in general, of the Democrat Party. They tried to introduce Tim Walz, remember, at the DNC, Democrat National Convention, as Coach Walz. They had his football team come out. There was a goal to try to portray him as Eric Taylor-like from Friday Night Lights. In an effort to try to connect with sports fans, they even peppered Walz's speech with football-related terminology, sport terminology. They put him in camouflage. They put him in boots. They gave him a gun. It didn't register. And it didn't register because sports fans and men know when somebody is cosplaying, they're dressing up in a costume and pretending to be something that they're not. And Tim Walz was a left-wing, not very representative sample of American men, and they tried to make him seem like a normal dude, and instead he was running around spirit fingers doing high leg kicks. Weird dude. Didn't seem like he really liked his wife very much. Just awkward in general. And I think he actually ended up costing Kamala votes. And I said at the time, and I'll stick to it, Josh Shapiro was the no-brainer choice. Governor of Pennsylvania, the biggest battleground state, would have been the choice, I really believe this, but for the fact that he was Jewish. Democrats have a Jewish voter problem. They have a lot of anti-Semites now that are in their party, and as a result, they were afraid to put him on the ticket because they thought that it would cost them in Michigan and other states. Now, ironically, they ended up losing Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin anyway, and the idea was Tim Walz was going to have appeal there. He did not, and again, I think this is emblematic of Democrats recognizing they have a problem, but not being able to work their way towards a solution that makes any sense at all. The Falcons have been fined $250,000. The defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, has been fined $100,000 because his 21-year-old son did a prank call of Shedeur Sanders. I think this is probably the biggest penalty in history for a prank call. If my math is right, $350,000. That's around $100,000 per minute of a phone call. That's an expensive phone call. But the outrage here blows my mind. A lot of guys have been prank called before. I get prank called all the time. You probably get prank called a decent amount. You definitely get spammed with people wanting you. They say right now, what's the big one that you owe money for driving through a toll, like you owe toll money. Everybody gets these text messages. Everybody gets these calls. The overreaction from the sports media to this prank call is one of the craziest things I've ever seen, particularly in light of actual serious felonious behavior that is alleged against players that barely gets a mention. You are better off being an NFL player accused of beating a woman than to have made a prank call of Shedeur Sanders in terms of the media condemnation that rains down upon you. It's an absolute joke. I think the sports media, to a large extent, has lit itself on fire over the past year. Over the past week with the way they have responded to everything surrounding Shedeur Sanders. Couple of other things that are out there. I want to give credit to Armando Salguero. I think we have a little bit of a clip of an interview that he did with Secretary of State Marco Rubio relating to Marco Rubio's attempt to get UNC coach Bill Belichick hired. I'll play this for you in a sec, but let me just tell you this. You need to go read Armando Salguero's piece that was up at OutKick about being part of a Cuban immigrant family and the fact that he was able to go to the White House on Monday to watch the Eagles at the White House. At some point, I'm not sure if he's officially gotten to meet President Trump. We need to make that happen. It's a crazy schedule all the time. But Armando's story, which I shared on my Twitter feed, I would really encourage all of you to go read because it's such a compelling story about the American dream and the freedoms that many people from other countries appreciate that we have here more than even the people that are fortunate enough to have been born here. But Marco Rubio, Armando Salguero, great work that he did and does for us on a regular basis. This is Armando talking to Secretary of State Marco Rubio about Rubio's involvement at Bill Belichick headed to UNC. Listen.
Well, I think his record got him the job, but I'm good friends with Mike Lombardi, who has worked with him for a long time, and Mike introduced me to Coach, and we spoke a number of times post-Patriot career. And when this opportunity presented itself, he had expressed an interest to me at one time in being in college coaching, and so I knew some people over at North Carolina. I connected them, and they took off running with it. And I think he's going to win. I think he's won everywhere he's ever been. So. Obviously, college football in many ways now is reminiscent of the NFL, or professional sports, and the decisions they have to make, salary cap-wise, with revenue sharing and the like. So I think he'll be very successful. I'm excited to see what he does over there. And it was my first foray in diplomacy, even before I got this job here at the State Department.
Marco Rubio, by the way, monster football fan. Good story there from Armando. Marco Rubio's son, Anthony, plays for the University of Florida, scored in their bowl game for the Gators. Very cool. I know, very exciting moment for Marco Rubio, dad, in addition to kind of an important job, Secretary of State. But he is a monster college football and NFL fan. And so good job with Armando Salguero doing that report. I believe also we have a couple of more clips, a couple more stories that I want to get to. I'm going to save 100 men versus one gorilla. Guys, remind me to do that tomorrow. And cross necklaces with the New York Times, if we can roll that over. Very, very funny stuff there. But Trump sat down for an interview, 100 days, with Moran, I think was the interview host, and called him out to his face about the huge cover-up of Joe Biden's mental and physical deterioration, and said, by the way, ABC was one of the worst, actually. Listen to this.
Do you think the reputation of the United States has gone down under your presidency?
No, I think it's gone way up, and I think we're a respected country again. We were laughed at all over the world. We had a president that couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, couldn't walk down a flight of stairs, couldn't walk across the stage without falling. We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news.
All right. Thank you.
And by the way, ABC is one of the worst. I have to be honest with you.
Thank you.
All right. That vintage Trump, credit to him for that. I've got to run out here in a few minutes because I got to head all the way across the city to go watch my 8th graders lacrosse game. But I did want to say this. My friend Shannon Terry has been tremendously successful in the message board recruiting landscape. I've interviewed him several times over this, but I think it's one of the stories that hasn't been told enough. Shannon Terry sold Rivals to Yahoo. For those of you out there that are longtime college football fans, Rivals was the initial message board conglomerate, the Rivals recruiting rankings. For those of you who are old school college football fans like me, during typically it was like Super Bowl week, you would have the National Signing Day. And National Signing Day was for college sports fans. Christmas morning, you would find out where players were going. All the fax machines would be rolling. And Shannon Terry built Rivals into basically a $100 million style company. He then sold it. Then he came back a few years later and started 24/7 Sports. Sold, by the way, Rivals to Yahoo. Then he started 24/7 Sports, which he ended up selling. It's a little bit better version of the original business that he built, sold that to CBS. Now he's got On3, which they still own. It's a Nashville-based company. All of these are Nashville-based companies. I've gotten to know Shannon well. I think probably Shannon is the single most successful online sports media executive ever, because I can't think of anyone that has built 3 different brands that now all have a $100 million plus valuation at some point in time. Well, news broke today. Our friend Ryan Glasspiegel, Front Office Sports, used to write at OutKick, does good work at Front Office Sports. News broke today that Shannon has bought Rivals back. I know how exciting this was for him. We were out to dinner, I don't know, a month or so ago, and he told me that he thought he was going to be able to get this deal done, that it had basically been signed, and good for him. I know that he'll do a good job merging Rivals and On3, and I know that that he, again, has been supremely successful in the online message board recruiting landscape, and so I do think it's always worth noting. You guys know I love sports, love media, love business, and anytime you can build a sports media business that has tremendous success, I love those stories, and I am very impressed by people who are able to do that. Shannon has done it arguably better than anybody. So closing up shop here today on the Wednesday edition of the program. Congrats to him. I don't know how many different sites I'm still paying Shannon for, but I know I am an online message board subscriber and have been for like 20 years. And I know that's a good business and will continue to be one. So love all of you. I'll be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Great job by Adam, by the way. If you like the addition of videos, he's doing a really good job putting those videos in, which is a new bells and whistle to add here. For those of you that may not be as active on social media, a lot of these videos I share during the course of the day, but it makes the discussion surrounding them easier to be able to import that. And so that's a new addition for the OutKick show. Again, appreciate all of you. I will be back tomorrow, and I hope all of you have fabulous Wednesdays wherever you are across the country or around the world. See y'all.